Hey, badass business owners. What if I told you that there are businesses out there that look like they are totally successful, but yet on the inside, when you pull the curtain back, they are totally crumbling. They do not make any money. The business is barely hanging on, and they really are living paycheck to paycheck, or in this case, because it's a business, it's job to job. That if all of a sudden that job turned off tomorrow, they would be royally screwed. You see, sometimes we can do a lot of sales, but if we're not really putting any of those sales in the pocket, not only of the business owner, but more importantly, into the pockets of the business, then this is just a house of cards that are ready to crumble at any given time. I can't tell you how many businesses I have talked to that on the outside, when I'm looking at their sales and when they're talking about the sales, everything sounds really good. They're doing, six figures. It could be 100, 200, 300, 500,000. But when you look at the profitability, the business is not making any money. Now, I'm not saying they're not getting paid because they've put themselves first to where they always get paid. But the problem is the business itself has no money, which means the business has no money to reinvest back into itself. The business doesn't have the ability to hire more people in order to grow the business. There's a lot of different things that are going on that business really is in trouble. And all it takes is one thing to happen and that business is going to fold. And I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit today because I wanted to go over some of the reasons that this happens. Now, I mentioned one thing earlier where they always make sure that they get paid. And God knows I am a huge proponent to making sure that you get paid. But as you recall, there are two hats in that business. There is the employee you in that business where you have to make sure you're getting paid. But honestly, you have to make sure the business is profitable because the business needs to take the profits that it makes to reinvest back into the business in order for the business to purchase things that it needs, to purchase inventory, to purchase equipment. It also needs money to be able to invest in labor hours, to hire more people. In some of your businesses, you need it to be able to buy stuff for the job because if you take on a job, let's say you do a bid for $800 for a customer, and they want you to purchase the materials, but you don't even have a dollar to your name to be able to go out there to do that, then you run into a really serious problem. And for some of you, when you're in this situation, what you do is you turn to debt, which means that you now have these credit lines that are out there or these credit cards, and you start running them up saying, oh, I'm going to pay it back. But what happens is that's not what you do with it. When you get that money from that customer for, let's say, that $800 I was just mentioning, instead of paying off that credit card right away, you end up putting that money in your pocket because once again, you're taking all the money out of the business. And next thing you know, you take these credit cards that had nothing on them, and then you wake up one day and you've got $10,000, $12,000 in debt on top of the business not making any money. And if the business isn't making any money, how do you expect to ever pay off that debt that you have gone into? Same thing where people will go out and they'll get equipment and they'll purchase it on debt. But once again, if the company is not creating any kind of profit, you're never going to pay that debt. And next thing you know, when you do get to the point where you can start paying the debt, you're paying the debt, but the business is still not making any money. I really want you guys to step back for a sec because I want you to look in the mirror and ask yourself, are you running a profitable business? Because those aren't the only things that's happening. Probably the most common thing that I see, like if I was to say what is something that's a commonality between everybody that's in this situation, the number one reason is, you guessed it, they are not looking at their business numbers. They'd rather put their head in the sand versus looking at the numbers and finding out what's going on because they know what's going on. They don't have any money. So if they're not looking at the numbers, how are they ever supposed to fix it? What they think is, oh, I can solve this. I can figure this out. I'll just sell more. Well, here's the problem, because we've talked about this in the past. If you are not running the business correctly today, all the sales in the world are not going to solve your problem. Because if you're not priced correctly, you're going to continue to not make the amount of money that you should be making on every sale. If you have bad habits, bad processes in the business where you're wasting money or expenses or time, you're going to continue to do that the more sales that you do, the more business that you chase. And all you're doing is creating more hours in a day for you to work because you haven't stepped back and said, hey, where am I bleeding the money? Another area that I see all the time is there is no rhyme or reason to the money that they spend. They get a wild hair up their butt and they're like, oh, if I go do this, I'm going to make all kinds of money without any kind of reasoning behind it. I'll have people that will come in and they're like, oh, I've talked to this social marketing person and they, for $1,000 a month, they're going to run my business crazy and they're going to do all this and A and B and what. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, do you even know what it is that you want to do? Do you even know how much you need to sell to break even on that? If you're not making a profit today, how do you expect to pay that $1,000 that you plan to give somebody? It's got to come from somewhere. And what ends up happening is they end up going on debt because they pay it on a credit card. You guessed it. But the one thing they don't change is they still continue to make sure they take out the money they need to keep their family afloat. Now listen, I'm not telling you that you need to stop paying yourself. What I'm telling you is you need to step back and stop spending money the business does not have. The business must be making money to be considered a business. Otherwise, all you've done is create this job for yourself. In most cases, people don't have a budget. They don't have any idea. When it comes to numbers, they don't have a clue. Not only what the business is doing, what they're spending their money on. There's times I'll be looking at their P&L and I'll be like, what is this? And they're like, I don't know. Oh, by the way, that's if they even have a P&L. Because so many people who are in this situation do not even do any kind of bookkeeping. These are the people that wait until the end of the year and then they just go grab everything and say, okay, well, I guess we got to figure out if we have to pay taxes, or I really didn't make any money, so I don't know if I have to pay taxes. Yeah, you did, because any money you took for yourself, you still have to pay taxes on because it's a pass-through entity for most of you, and you still have to pay taxes on the money that you made. And then that leads to, okay, I'm at the time for tax time, which when I'm recording this, it is tax season and it's almost over. But you know how many small business owners wake up and go, oh my God, I owe $5,000 in taxes and I don't have $5,000. Well, of course you don't, because you forget that the profit in your business, there's a third of it that you need to set aside at all times to make sure you have the money to pay your taxes. I'm not doing this to shame anybody. And if by the chance this resonates with any of you, what I'm trying to do is give you a wake-up call. I really need you to step back and say, I can't keep running my business the way I'm running it, because all I'm doing is getting further and further in debt. My business isn't making any money. I don't know where the money's going. I'm barely making enough to have my family survive off of what it is that I make. I need you to pause. I need you to step back. It is all fixable. But as long as you run around with your blinders on, you're never going to be able to right that ship. You're never going to be able to fix the problems that you have. All you're doing is throwing money that you do not have, trying to create something, trying and praying and hoping that it's going to turn into that magic pill that's going to make you sales and profits and everything that you need to right the problems of your business. And the reality is your business isn't going to right itself without you sitting down and taking a hard look at where the business is today and what needs to be done in order to make it successful. There's so many different things that I see people do. I'm like, okay, can you help me understand why you're doing this? And it's like crickets. There's no answer because they don't have the first clue. They thought it was a good idea at the time, but they never really thought it through. And you have to know what's going on with every dollar you spend in your business. This is one of the reasons I tell people also, do not go into debt. Because if you start going into debt without knowing your business numbers, it's a disaster waiting to happen, because you're going to wake up and you're going to have $30, $40, $50, $60,000 worth of debt that you have no way on earth to pay back anytime soon. And now you're going to create this big, massive hole that you're going to have to get out of. But like I said, it is doable. You can get out of it if you're there already today. So I don't want you to lose hope. But what I'm hoping to do is to stop some of these people that are derailing their business and going down the wrong path. Listen, folks, it's very important that you know your business numbers. This isn't what this episode is necessarily about. But yes, it does hold the key to understanding what is going on in the first place. But what I'm telling you is you can't take every dime out of your business without leaving money in the business in order to, one, pay those taxes, two, reinvest into making the business better. But some of the most important things that you can do is dive into those expenses and stop the bleeding on anything that you do not need to be spending money on. You need to stop and look at your pricing and making sure that you are priced correctly. You cannot set your prices to get yourself out of this hole. What you need to do is you need to set your prices to be the correct version of what they should be in the first place, and then figure out how you're going to get out of this hole. But for some of you, you're priced wrong to begin with, so that's the first place you need to step. But if you are out of control on your expenses and what you spend your money on, you can't pass that on to the customers. It's not their fault. You don't know how to run a business. But that's what ends up happening. And then you raise your prices so far that nobody's willing to buy and purchase your stuff because you've priced yourself so far out of the market, and you haven't really developed a good why they should pay that much for that. So the price might be something you could get to someday, but you probably haven't even gotten yourself to that price yet because you don't even know your own value proposition, who your ideal customer is, and who you should be charging. Now, I don't mean to be rattling on about this. Like I said, I'm trying to get the attention of some of you that aren't stepping back, looking at your numbers, and diving in. I need to get the attention of those of you that are spending every dime in your business without rhyme or reason. I need you to realize that just because you look successful on the outside doesn't mean you're successful on the inside. There's a great book that everybody should read called The Millionaire Next Door, and I'm going to link it into what it is I'm talking about here. What that book talks about is the fact that when you see someone driving around in a fancy car, living in a fancy house, and saying they make $1 million, that doesn't mean they have any money in the bank. That the millionaire next door is driving a beat-up old truck, somebody who lives in a modest house, and yet their bank account is fat as heck because it is holding all the money. That they've got the money and they are a true millionaire because they've built their wealth and they don't need to be flashy about it. Sometimes a business can be the exact same way. It can look very flashy and it can look very successful, but when you peel back the curtain, it is struggling to stay alive. I don't want you to be like that. I really, really want you to be a very successful business. And I want you to be one of those businesses that looks to be very steady Eddie, fantastic. Everybody wants to use them. But you know what? They have very healthy bank accounts, both personally and within the business. I want you to be the business that's like the millionaire next door. And by the way, if anyone wants to read that book, I really do highly recommend that book. I love it. I'll put a link in the show notes. But my main point is, if you know that you're running that business and you're barely holding on, there is a solution. You've got to stop the madness. You've got to be able to start looking at your business numbers. You need to start keying in your expenses. You need to start looking at everything. You need to know where every dollar is going and what you expect out of that dollar. That if you're going to go spend $1,000 with a social marketing company, what are you going to get in return? How much business do you need to create out of that $1,000? Do you need to create an additional $10,000 of new sales on top of that just to be able to break even? What is the goal? What is the plan? That's what I want you to do. I don't want you to be a business that is doing so much in sales and yet you're not making any money. I don't want you stressing out at the end of the day. I don't want you to be somebody that when you look at your P&L, that when it's all keyed in, that you've been losing thousands of dollars at a time. There are people out there that have borrowed money, taken money, and then all of a sudden it's gone. If you have bad habits now, just because somebody turns around and gives you $50,000, you're going to be broke poor again because you have bad habits. And I don't want you to be a statistic of one of those businesses that fail within their first few years. With over 50% of businesses failing in its first few years, this is one of those main reasons this happens. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this one because I know I'm rattling on, and we all know that when I start rattling, it's time for me to say goodbye. So with that, please watch your business numbers. Please dive in. Please know where every dollar is going in your business. Please stop the madness. Please start really waking up and realizing I need to run a very profitable business, and I need to know what's going on within my business. With that, I'll talk to you on the next episode. Bye for now.